Good afternoon. My name is Ashley, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to a deeper look at our Grantmaking for Equity conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. And if you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you, and I would now like to turn the conference over to Judith Bell, Vice President of Programs. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We are really excited to be having this conversation. So let me start by giving you a sense of how we'll spend the time on this call. I'm very mindful that all of you want to be able to report back to your development teams, to your boards, and to others about the specifics in terms of our grant-making strategy to advance racial and economic equity across the region. In our first call back in June, we gave a high-level view, and on this call we're going to dive deeper and provide you with up-to-date information on our grant-making strategy. I do want to let you all know that that June call is on our website if you'd like to listen to it. I'm here today with Kay Fernandez-Smith, our new Assistant Vice President of Programs at the Foundation, along with the directors of our 3 Pathways to Equity. Francesca Vitor, the director of our People Pathway, Expanding Access to Opportunity. Landon Williams, the director of our Place Pathway, Anchoring Communities. And Myra Chow, the director of our Power Pathway, Nurturing Equity Movements. I'll talk briefly to provide some framing about how we got here and what we hope to achieve. And then I'll turn it over to the program directors and to Kay to go into the specifics of what we hope to accomplish with grantee partners in the Bay Area. We'll save time to answer questions at the end of our presentations. We've already received some questions leading up to this call, but please email questions, which we are monitoring live as the call is going on, to vpprograms@sff.org. That email again is vpprograms@sff.org. And again, as the operator said, you can also do your questions by audio. Just press star 1 to raise your hand. And if you want to withdraw the question, press the pound key. And we'll be both bringing in voice questions as well as monitoring by email. So let me give you some context and overview of the equity agenda. Throughout our history, the San Francisco Foundation has been firmly committed to serving the people of our region. The diversity of our people and communities have been a critical asset for the Bay Area, for our quality of life, and for the strength of our economy. Now we're at a critical crossroads. At the same time that our region has experienced a lot of growth and increases in wealth, we have seen widening inequality. Basically, the rising tide has not lifted all boats, and this has been especially true for people working low-wage jobs and for people of color who have too often been left behind. As we described to you on our previous call, we reached out and connected with community, with civic, business, and elected leaders from across the region. We reviewed data and listened to your views on the opportunities and the challenges we're facing and the roles that we at the San Francisco Foundation could play to make the region a stronger and more equitable place for everyone. In July, we announced our deepening commitment to expand opportunity and inclusion for struggling communities and people of color from across the Bay Area. We've always had a regional footprint. Now we have a regional agenda. We've been committed to social justice throughout our history. Now we're building upon that with our agenda to advance greater racial and economic equity. Across the region, we need to ensure that everyone has a chance to get a good job, live in a safe and affordable home, has a strong political voice, and can live in a community that provides real access to opportunity. This is the vision of our equity agenda and what we aim to achieve by supporting people, place, and power. Our programmatic work, including our initiatives and projects, is now aligned under these 3 equity pathways. Now I want to talk some more about the people, place, and power pathways and our grant making. We know how important it is to listen and learn, so we spent time engaging grantees and partners to get feedback about the Foundation's programs and our grant-making process. We heard that as we focus our work on advancing racial and economic equity in the region, we need to exercise our leadership differently, to partner, to speak out, and to support our grantees in different ways. We heard that there was a need for more integrated approaches and that our grants needed to be bigger, and that we should make more multi-year grants, and provide core support grants to allow grantees to strategically plan, to do the work that is longer term, and implement programs and projects that may not yield results in 1 year. In early July, we announced over $5 million in initial equity-focused grants. These first grants, designed to launch our equity agenda, were emblematic of the kinds of grants we plan on making in the future. The average grant size was bigger. We went from average grants of about $30,000 to an average of about $80,000. There were many multi-year grants, and most of the grants were focused on core support for organizations committed to advancing equity. While we believe that this is a better strategy, it also means that we will be reducing the overall number of grants that we make. To avoid confusion with the grant-making program I'm about to describe, I wanted to mention that included in the initial $5 million in grants towards our equity strategy was support for focused campaigns. For example, the $5 million in grants included a number of grants connected to the $580 million Alameda County housing bond. Our grants help with the initial steps to develop and get the bond approved for the November ballot, and we will continue to support that effort, and in the process actually of moving some grants right now to support Get Out the Vote and other campaign-related activities. These grants are separate from the open application process that we are discussing today. Now let me get to the upcoming opportunities, which I'm sure you all want to hear about. In November, we will issue new grant guidelines for our open applications. We'll hold another call then to give you additional details and answer questions at that point. We are calling these open applications because any 501c3 nonprofit is welcome to apply and does not need to be invited to apply. In January, we'll accept letters of intent for this open application under one common grant application. This will be an open door to a suite of equity-focused opportunities, including grants from each of our pathways and from an overarching pool for innovation and support for smaller or new organizations. You will be able to request support across different pathways if that seems appropriate for your work. An internal grants review committee will determine the organizations that will be invited to submit full proposals. Those invited to submit proposals will also be notified which pathway their grant opportunity will be primarily connected to, and will also be connected to a foundation staff person. We know that part of this process is about building relationships. We want to make sure that we help you build and maintain connections to our staff. Moreover, with the restructuring of our program department to reflect our equity agenda, there are new staff to get to know and to work with. Once the proposals have been submitted, they will be reviewed and final decisions will be made. We expect to issue grant funds in May. So that's the basics. One equity-focused grant application, open in January for letters of intent, then requests for full proposals coming in early spring, and final decisions and the release of funds happening in May. So at this point, let me turn it over to Francesca to share more about the Expanding Access to Opportunity pathway, or in shorter terms, the PEOPLE pathway.
Thank you, Judith. I'm Francesca Vitor, the Director of the Expanding Access to Opportunity, or the PEOPLE pathway. The PEOPLE pathway supports the belief that everybody deserves a good job so that they can afford to pay their bills, stay in their homes, and not have to struggle to make ends meet. As the economy has improved in the Bay Area, not everyone has benefited from the economic gains and growth. Increasingly, people of color and those that are earning low wages are shut out of opportunities, and many face multiple barriers to accessing a good job or a home they can afford. To make matters worse, commutes from home to work are getting longer as people are forced to find affordable homes further away from where job opportunities are. People are spending a lot more time in their cars or on the bus, getting to work, decreasing the time they have with family and with friends. The Foundation supports efforts that expand people's access to opportunities, as well as initiatives to remove the systemic barriers that block people from being able to take advantage of the economic opportunities in our region. We want to partner and make investments that focus on the interrelated areas of job creation and training and housing and transit, as well as ways to improve our broken education and criminal justice systems. Let me share what we hope to accomplish in this pathway and the grant-making strategies we will support to get there. We know that 1.1 million new jobs will be coming to the region by 2040. The Foundation is supporting efforts to make sure that those jobs are available to people of color and to people that are struggling to make ends meet. We also recognize that immigrants, youth, people re-entering the workforce after incarceration, and the unemployed and underemployed need targeted interventions and supports to have a chance at a brighter future and to reach their full potential. Our 4 key strategies in the People Pathway include supporting 1, state and local policy and advocacy that promote job opportunities and a living wage. 2, efforts to improve our public transit system so that people can move easily to and from work. 3, overall systems change, as well as strategic interventions where our current systems are failing us. And 4, advancing projects that hold the potential to reduce racial strife and advance racial equity. Let me talk more specifically about how we will approach this through a focus on jobs, transit, and systems change. We will support strategies that help people get high-quality, living wage jobs, build career ladders, and develop social enterprises. We will support job programs that not only prepare our region for climate change and population growth, but make sure that everyone benefits and that we leverage and target the huge amount of public dollars coming from the state into the region to make sure that those communities are not left behind. We will take advantage of the many job opportunities that the clean energy economy and the construction of infrastructure will provide to ensure that people of color and those earning low wages are trained for and can access the jobs of the future. In our focus on transit systems, we know that housing located near transit can help the environment and make a big difference in individual and families' budgets. Too often, housing and transit take up so much of our monthly budgets that little is left over for other essentials. Therefore, we will support efforts to make transit and housing more affordable and ensure that they are connecting people to good job opportunities. We will seek to leverage public funding for transit to improve our infrastructure from both a planning and equity perspective and to better connect low-wage workers to jobs. We also believe that if we can help remove the systemic barriers to opportunity, specifically in the education and criminal justice systems, we can build better pathways to a quality job. So we will look for creative and innovative projects that will, 1, help young people develop into successful adults, 2, employ people re-entering the workforce from the justice system, and 3, help our immigrant communities and communities of color connect to real opportunity throughout the Bay Area. Regarding grants for housing work, we know we are in a housing crisis in the Bay Area. We heard loud and clear from our community partners that we need to address the housing crisis and that we need all hands on deck. While Landon Williams and the PLACE team will be leading the affordable housing work, the People Pathway will help identify state and regional policies and investment opportunities to build more affordable housing, especially near transit. In conclusion, the People Pathway will advance racial and economic equity by supporting efforts that create job opportunities for residents with the greatest barriers to employment, increase the availability of high-quality, affordable housing near transit and accessible to jobs, and remove barriers to jobs by improving the education and criminal justice systems. We will use this first open cycle in January of the new equity strategy to further develop our outcomes and strategies and to learn from our grant partners on how best to expand access to opportunity and remove systemic barriers. And now I will turn it over to my colleague Landon to discuss our second pathway, place.
Thank you, Francesca. Hello, everyone. I'm Landon Williams, Director of the PLACE Pathway, which is focused on anchoring communities. The PLACE Pathway works with our community partners, local government, and others to retain the vibrant cultural and ethnic character of the San Francisco Bay Area. We want to continue to have the Bay Area be recognized as a region that is welcoming, a place where vastly diverse communities see themselves represented in the arts, culture, and civic life of their neighborhoods and where they can thrive. This is a vision, and as we are all aware, the Bay Area continues to experience unprecedented growth. Residential and commercial rents are skyrocketing, and long-term residents and the nonprofit organizations that serve them are challenged to remain in their current location. A recent study of residential displacement projects that in the next 5 to 10 years, as many as 300,000 families, representing 600,000 to 1 million people, will be forced to move out of the Bay Area. Those most at risk of displacement are people earning low wages and people of color. As you heard from Francesca, the issue of housing requires us to tackle it from multiple directions. While Francesca's work in the People Pathway is focused on regional and statewide policy, the PLACE Pathway will focus on community-specific approaches to increase the supply of affordable housing, that's housing production, to stabilize affordable housing, preservation, and to work to keep current residents in their homes, that's protection. To intervene in this displacement trajectory, our funding priorities in the PLACE Pathway are focused in 5 strategies. The first strategy is the one that is to increase the production of new affordable housing. This is an imperative that we support efforts to increase the supply of affordable housing. This is not a panacea by itself. However, when we look at the trends, we see that cities and counties across the Bay Area have underproduced affordable housing for decades. How can people feel a sense of belonging if they cannot afford to live in their community? This is an essential factor in our equation to support a sense of belonging. The second strategy is to stabilize existing housing, affordable housing. Many affordable apartments were built with rent restrictions, but these are now expiring. And other housing, including apartment houses and others, are in need of rehabilitation or require different types of financing if they are to remain affordable. There is an aggressive trend to purchase these affordable homes and convert them to market rates. Since those living in these homes can't afford market rent, current tenants must leave. And given the current housing market, many find it very difficult to locate new homes that they can afford. We aim to partner with groups to stem the tide of tenants being evicted so that they are not forced to relocate to places away from their friends, neighbors, schools, and the social support vital to their well-being. Our third strategy is to advance measures that keep current tenants in their existing home. It is less expensive to keep people in their current affordable housing than it is to build new housing for them. So organizations and activities to advance strategies for rent control and just cause eviction protections will be an area for funding. Our fourth strategy is to stabilize community anchors. Community anchors such as arts and cultural centers, schools, neighborhood centers, and faith-based organizations help make our neighborhoods welcoming places. We need to invest in efforts that stabilize and strengthen local arts and cultural organizations, and that encourage them to join with community groups and residents to produce art and engage in cultural activities that highlight community connections. The sights and sounds of culture echoing through neighborhoods can create a sense of belonging for all. Finally, our fifth place-informed strategy is to stabilize small businesses and organizations. That provide local jobs, goods, and services in our neighborhood. These small businesses range from not-for-profit service providers to small mom-and-pop stores and other businesses. For example, in places like Chinatown, they define the cultural character of the neighborhood. In East and West Oakland, they sell the basics, food and services, and they are the social service organizations where residents can go to improve their computer skills and to help themselves gain skills needed to enter the workforce. There are also the youth centers and training sites where youth with high potential but little opportunity find encouragement, skills, and motivation that lasts a lifetime. We believe that this combination of strategies will help the Bay Area retain the cultural vitality and the diverse communities and neighborhoods that of our region. Now, although PLACE has multiple strategies, I want to repeat that our main housing and displacement strategies are affordable housing production, preservation of existing housing, and measures to keep tenants and residents in their existing housing. I look forward to reading applications in the open cycle that are related to all 5 of our place-informed strategies and partnering with you to advance this work. Now, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Myra, who will provide an overview of the third equity pathway, Nurturing Equity Movement.
Thank you, Landon. I'm Myra Chow, and I'm excited to share our plans for the Power Pathway and how our work also supports the people-focused and place-informed pathways. We all know that movements are forcing conversations on race, justice, and equity. More than ever, we need to build power to ensure a strong political and community voice for all. I'll be sharing what we hope to accomplish in this pathway, funding strategies to get there, and upcoming grant opportunities. As we all know, it is challenging to build community power, but it is critical to achieving racial and economic equity. Throughout our community listening sessions, we heard that people want the foundation to build upon its history of work with all of you to promote social justice in the region. The vision we share is of a Bay Area where community residents lead the change, develop the solutions, and decide what's best, not just for themselves and their families, but as a community. People want to influence the institutions that shape their lives, schools, police, public health, and public work departments, and so on. They want to be heard by these institutions and represented within them. What we hope to do is to strengthen and develop new leadership, improve the region's community organizing capacity, and bolster organizations and networks to build the influence needed to make change happen. While we want to win anti-displacement measures in the upcoming election, the focus of the Power Pathway is to build community power for the long run and on the equity issues of the day. Right now, one of the most pressing challenges facing communities is displacement. By supporting movement building and community leadership over time and in the years ahead, the community will continue to define what the equity agenda will be. Through the Power Pathway, the Foundation will support these efforts by funding 5 aspects of movement building. First, we will support community organizing and advocacy with communities of color and with people earning low wages. Second, we want to strengthen coalitions and alliances that promote racial and economic equity. Third, we'll support civic engagement, specifically voter engagement, to win equity campaigns. Fourth, we'll fund leadership development of low-wage workers and people of color to serve in positions of power as elected officials, on boards and commissions, and in community leadership roles. And lastly, the fifth area is research, data, and communications that support movement building. I'm excited to announce there'll be 3 grant opportunities in the Power Pathway that will be part of the open cycle Judith described. The first opportunity will support 2 strategies that are core to building community power. The first is community organizing and advocacy, and the second is strengthening of coalitions and alliances that aggregate and multiply community power across different neighborhoods in the 5 Bay Area counties, across a wide array of racial and ethnic groups, and across issue areas such as economic and environmental justice and immigration and criminal justice reform. The second opportunity in support of movement building is a new Rapid Response Fund for grants up to $15,000 to respond in a timely way to present-day events that advance or defend racial and economic equity in the Bay Area. For example, we could support organizers who are convening community members in the midst of a crisis by providing funding for meeting spaces or facilitators. Rapid response grants will become available early next year with the guidelines and applications posted in January. The third opportunity applies to congregations or faith-based organizations. Through our Faiths program, we will make small grants that increase cultural participation, civic and cultural participation, promote economic and racial equity, or provide community services to low-income residents. We are looking forward to working with you and supporting your efforts to build community power. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Kay.
Thanks, Myra. We're almost at the end of our presentation portion of the call, so I want to remind you to submit your questions to vpprograms@sff.org. That's vpprograms@sff.org. Or you can press star and the number 1 to raise your hand and ask your question by audio. You can push the pound button to withdraw your question. We're receiving those emails as we speak and hope to answer them during the Q&A period shortly. So I'm going to talk about one more grant opportunity that will be available during this open cycle in January, and then wrap up our presentations with more detail about the 2-step process for the open grants and a general timeline for you to be aware of. In addition to the Equity Pathway grant opportunities that Francesca, Landon, and Myra spoke about, and as a part of the same open cycle and timeline, we plan on awarding grants to support new and/or innovative approaches to advancing racial and economic equity. The Foundation has had a history of seeding new coalitions, programs, and organizations, and this will continue that legacy. These innovation grants will have a particular criteria to support smaller organizations whose operating budget is $1 million or less. And just to be clear, the grants made through the pathways does not have to have a threshold for the organizational size. So applicants for the pathways may also be smaller or larger organizations. But this particular innovation grant opportunity will prioritize smaller organizations or efforts that are emerging. So let's move on to the next steps and what you can expect in this open grant-making cycle. In November, we'll issue new grant guidelines that will provide more details about the equity pathway strategies you heard about today and the innovation grants. We'll hold another teleconference just like this one to complement the written guidelines and to give you additional details and answer your questions. In January 2017, we'll accept letters of intent under one common application. This is meant to be a short 1 to 2 page document communicating what your organization is working on and how it aligns with our equity strategy. This will be an open door to the suite of equity-focused opportunities, including grants from each of our pathways and from the innovation grants that I shared earlier. You might be thinking it's challenging to know which pathway or grant opportunity to apply to. We get that. So we want to make it easier for you to apply because the people, place, and power equity work are so interrelated. Therefore, once you submit an LOI, an internal grants review committee across the 3 pathways will review your LOI together so that we can help to identify whether your work seems best aligned with the people, place, and or power strategies. For those that submitted the January LOI, we'll inform organizations of several things by February. First, you'll know whether your LOI meets our grant guidelines, and as a result, you'll be encouraged to submit a full proposal in March. Second, you'll also be notified which equity pathway or grant opportunity your full proposal fits under. And third, you'll be partnered with your program contact at the foundation. As Judith mentioned, we know that part of this process is about building relationships. We want to make sure that we help you build and maintain connections to our staff. And with the restructuring of our program department to reflect our equity agenda, there are new staff to get to know and to work with. So we promise to help make those connections. Once the full grant proposals have been submitted in March, they will be reviewed and our staff will conduct due diligence. Final decisions will be made in April, and we expect to administer the grant funds in May. I'm turning it back to Judith now to respond to your questions.
Terrific. Thank you, Kay, and thanks to everybody else. So we're getting plenty of questions, so we're going to dig right into those, and we'll see how many we can get to before the hour closes. And I want to encourage you to keep sending in your questions and indicate whether or not you'd like to do it by audio as well. So we have a question about the application and letter of intent process. Can proposals touch each of the 3 areas, people, place, and power, if what we're working on is multifaceted, and you recommend focusing on one of the 3 areas? So you absolutely can indicate, you'll be able to indicate that your proposal may be part of 1, 2, or all 3 of the pathways, and we encourage you to do that. We don't want you to try and reorient your work to fit one of the pathways. We are looking for work that is interrelated, and we will be interested in funding work as well that just is spot on in one of the pathways. Then we have a question about whether or not collaborative proposals are allowed, and the answer to that is a very loud yes. We really hope that we'll be able to support lots of collaboration because we know how important that is to advance an agenda on racial and economic equity. Then, Myra, this question's for you. The question is for multi-organization coalitions or alliances whose work supports equity strategies, will proposals that are focused on developing the capacity of the coalition be encouraged?
Yes. We're trying to build the regional movement building infrastructure, and coalition capacity building is one aspect of that.
Terrific. And then, Kay, could you tell folks, there's a question here, can we submit more than one letter of intent, and what will the deadline be?
So, yes, we will accept more than one LOI. However, we hope that the purpose of this one common application is to get applicants to be able to share the kind of work that aligns with our equity strategies. And our internal review grants committee will be able to identify, again, as Judith mentioned, whether they're in the power, place, or people pathway, and if they're going across the pathways as well. We don't yet have a specific deadline for January and when those LOIs are going to be due. However, when we issue the new grant guidelines that are coming out in November, you'll have a better sense of when the deadline is.
Okay, and Kay, here's another one. Are these grants for general operating support or program-specific grants?
These grants are for both. As Judith mentioned, we listened to the field and heard that we want to be supporting more core operating for organizations and bigger grants and multi-year grants. However, we also are going to be reviewing LOIs and applications for program-specific opportunities.
Great. And now we have a question about whether we'll consider loans or PRIs, program-related investments, as part of the letter of intent process. And the answer to that is no. There's a separate process for loans or PRIs, and that will not be a part of the January open application that we've been discussing today. If you do have a question on loans or PRIs, please email again to the VP Programs address, and we'll get you in touch with the folks who do handle those requests. Kay, here's another question for you. Are you considering new approaches that are in the pilot stage or have less than a year of operating history?
Yes. The answer to that question is that we are supporting that, which is why we have these pool of funds to support the investing in innovation grants, as I mentioned in my earlier talking points.
Great. And earlier I mentioned about organizations needing to have a 501c3. Now we have a question about whether new organizations that don't yet have their C3 status, whether they can apply with a fiscal agent or fiscal sponsor. And for our purposes, yes, you can apply if you have a fiscal sponsor, but you cannot apply with just a fiscal agent. Landon, there's a question here for you, and the question is, there's a big emphasis in our strategy on creating new affordable homes and stabilizing current affordable housing with an emphasis on renters, but how will we support organizations that focus on preserving the current housing stock for low-income homeowners?
So the answer is yes. I tried to reiterate that we have the three strategies. New affordable housing is definitely one that we need because we underproduced affordable housing for years. But then I also mentioned that it's the preservation of existing housing. And although we may look at and focus some on multifamily units, there are also folks who are in their single-family homes that are in need of maybe refinancing and those types of things. But we would really encourage the organization that's submitting the LOI to let us know what it is that they're doing and how they go about doing it.
Great. And Landon, while we have you, there's another question that just came in that I think you can speak to, and that is to please talk about how the San Francisco Foundation conceives of arts and arts education within our new equity strategy. The writer points out that the Bay Area has been a rich artistic center for years, but that the changing economic climate puts artists, and particularly artists of color, at risk of displacement, and that the obvious trickle-down is that there are fewer artists of color in our schools and communities. So, Landon, could you speak to that? I know you've done a lot of thinking on that topic.
Yes, I can. So, when I think about how arts plays a critical part in the culture and the life of our community, I'm reminded of the anti-divestment issue around South Africa. And I was engaged in that, and that a lot of people didn't understand quite what we meant by divestment and what was happening in South Africa. And then there was a play by the name of Serafina, that it was a performing arts piece, but it so dramatically displayed what was happening in South Africa until people got it. So when we talk about culture and arts being a place where folks can reflect the life of the community and the issues that it faces, that's a part of what we're talking about, but it's broader than that. So what I'm in the process of doing right now is hiring a program officer who has an economic development background, but who also understands and can help the place pathway in integrating our arts with our anti-displacement and other community building work.
Thank you, Landon. That was terrific. Francesca, we have a question for you. And the writer would like to know, how does organizing with low-income people of color, especially youth, around the issues of climate justice at the intersection of racial and economic justice figure into our new strategic vision?
Oh, great question. Thank you. Well, we know that climate change disproportionately is going to impact low-income communities of color, which are the communities that we serve at the San Francisco Foundation. And we're really trying to be forward-thinking and solutions-oriented, especially when it comes to the jobs of the future. The state is really providing us with some unprecedented opportunity when it comes to jobs and clean energy jobs and transitioning our economy away from fossil fuels, as well as some of the cap and trade and other public dollars that are going to be coming from the state to the region. We want to make sure that our communities in the region not only have access to those jobs, but can really benefit to the opportunities that the state is providing when it comes to climate change. So I think there's a variety of ways, whether it's jobs, whether it's economic benefit, whether it's clean fuel and transit opportunities that are coming online in the coming century that can help prepare our communities for climate change and engage them in the climate justice struggle.
Fabulous. We have a question here about, to the extent that policy advocacy and systems change campaigns may involve some lobbying activity, will that be an issue in accepting a grant proposal? And we, actually, as a community foundation, can and do support lobbying activities, so that should not be an issue in your grant proposal, and it will be very clear in the grant application how you need to indicate to us that your work will involve some lobbying activity, because there are reporting requirements that we need to adhere to, but should not be an issue in accepting, or for that matter, in moving the grant through the process. Then we have on the phone operator, if you could open up the line for Jania, that would be terrific. And Jania, if you could speak up and let us know our question, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi. Yeah, it's just real quick. I also sent it. Just in terms of working with women and girls who we're housing and sexually helping them heal for sexually assaults. And so just trying to figure out where that'll fit. And I think the question was almost answered, because in terms of when your guideline comes out, hopefully we'll be able to see if and where we fit.
That's true. You will be able to see that once the guidelines come out, but I know that the women and girls you're talking about are largely people of color and largely people with low income. So
yes.
They've brought on into the communities that we're concerned about, and you'll be able to tell more how they fit in when the guidelines are issued. Thank you for your...
Thank you.
And then we have another caller, Eddie Dillard. And operator, if you could open up the line, we'll talk with Eddie. Eddie, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Tell us your question.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I have two questions. They're both for Langdon. And the first one is, we have a developer who is in the process of building some affordable housing. And they have a funding gap. They're trying to build, I think, 120 units of affordable housing, and they have a funding shortfall. Will the San Francisco Foundation be able to provide them with some relief so that they can make the affordable housing project a reality?
Do you want to give me a second question, too, and I can answer them both?
Okay, and the second question is, we have an organization that is attempting to collaborate with the Peralta Community College District to provide some educational opportunities for students in the music industry. And the district is working with us to provide some opportunities for students to learn about music, how to produce it, how to write it, how to play it, how to market it. And would the foundation consider providing some resources to help us make that project a reality?
Okay, so with both of those, I'd say that when our funding guidelines come out in November, it'll be a little clearer about what we will and what we won't fund. I can say that the foundation has resources beyond just our grant So I would also encourage you to take a look at what our PRI programs can and can't provide in terms of the gap financing. On the music study, there I think if you are working through one of the cultural and arts organizations that we mentioned as community anchor, it would be something I think that we would consider, but I would again encourage you to wait until our guidelines come out, take a look at those, and then apply through the LOI process.
Great. Thank
you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate the question. We have a question that came in by email, and it says about the people pathway in terms of reducing racial strife. Can we learn more about that? Francesca, you want to answer that question?
Sure. I'm going to just give an example of a type of grant that we would support, a type of project we would support. We are currently in the process of making a grant. We've joined together with some fellow funders who have been, quite concerned about the escalating strife between police and community members. So we are all together embarking on an effort to build trust in communities. There's two pieces to that project. One will be to develop partnerships between police members and community members, and the other part will be to conduct a series of trainings on racial bias in police departments. We're very excited about this work, and we really hope that this will not only reduce racial strife in our communities, but help us advance racial equity in the region.
And that gives you a sense of the kind of work we'll be interested in going forward through the application process. We have another question here on the arts and culture arena, and it says, can you elaborate on where arts and culture funding would fit into the three different pathways? And then the second question is, will the Koshland funding previously offered still be available? So let me just answer that the Koshland funding will not be a part of the open application process. It's a separate process, and you can actually find out more about Koshland on our website. And then on the arts and culture funding, we do anticipate that arts and culture funding will be a part of different pathways. For instance, we know how much arts and culture can matter in terms of movement building. Landon actually spoke to that earlier in his discussion about the film and the movement in South Africa. And then we also know how important it is in the context of community. So we expect arts and culture funding to be particularly important in the power pathway and in the place pathway. And again, you'll be able to see more about this when the guidelines are posted in November. Then we have a question about whether the foundation intends to address the current extreme racial inequities with regard to health care as part of the new focus. And the writer says that we serve a high percentage of minorities who are homeless and poor with advanced aids who need housing and medical care. So we do not expect that the grant program will be funding health care. Instead, the focus will be more on the social determinants of health, and these are actually things like housing. Being homeless is actually one of the top ways to end up with health problems, and so our funding will address those determinants of health, and we believe will therefore contribute to the overall health of the people in the Bay Area, particularly folks who are lower wage earners and people of color. Now I want to turn back to the phones. We have a question here from David Milstein. And operator, if you'd open the line, David, we'd be happy to hear your question.
Well, thank you. I'm wondering if you could please elaborate a bit on how education initiatives could best fit within the pathways.
Okay, I'm going to turn that over to Francesca.
Yes, so we're back on the people pathway here, and we really have recognized that education equity is a barrier, a systemic barrier, that in order to advance opportunity, we really need to intervene and address, especially the inequities we're seeing in the system. We're going to go further and develop strategies as we do our guidelines, but a couple of things that we are thinking about is really how to reduce absenteeism and how to reduce suspensions, and we're thinking about strategies that have to do with restorative justice in the school system and like that, because we know they're closely connected to racial equity and graduation rates. So that's some of our early thinking in the education space. We know that there's a lot of work being done on education, and there is a lot more to be done. So we look forward to developing those strategies further.
Great, thank you. So there's a question here about faith-based funding. Myra, I wonder if you'll answer this for us. The question is the faith-based funding channel new for the San Francisco Foundation? And if yes, might there be parameters available to provide an idea of the type of program that the Foundation wants to support? Myra.
Yes, we've had FACE. FACE is actually the name of the program. It stands for
Foundation Alliance with Interfaith to Heal Society.
Thank you, Lyndon. And they have made small grants over the years. An example of a type of grant, and again, this is only available to faith organizations or congregations. And the examples in the past have been a small grant to help with civic engagement and voter outreach for a congregation.
Great, okay. And so next we have a question about whether or not our work will be supporting the disability community, people with disabilities. And yes, we will be supporting efforts that are designed to improve the lives of people with disability. Again, people with disability, many of them are people of color, and we know that they face lots of barriers to opportunity, whether it's about jobs or whether it's about housing or other issues from a community perspective. So we will definitely be supporting folks in that regard. And then we have a question about where youth development programming fits. And the writer says that it seems like employment is the strongest fit, but they're also wondering about whether applications in the power strategy might be welcomed. And so, Myra, you want to take that one?
Yes. In our leadership development and organizing efforts, we will absolutely look at youth-focused efforts.
Okay, great. Francesca, there's a question here about how we think about environmental organizations to help promote racial and economic inclusion in the Bay Area, and whether we'll support small environmental groups, even with those with a pretty small budget of $175,000 a year.
Yeah, the smaller budget organizations might be an opportunity for our innovation fund that Kay spoke to earlier. So we really are looking for your innovative, creative ideas that are solution-oriented and that do have strong equity focus for that fund. We also understand that the solar movement, the clean energy movement, has already provided a lot of racial and economic opportunities for our communities. So we will be looking for more of those. We also believe that there's a lot of green jobs which are related to infrastructure, and that we're going to need to do a lot to rebuild our transit systems. Our affordable housing needs to be clean and green, and there's all kinds of opportunities in there. So we really believe that the job sector is going to be a huge opportunity to promote racial and economic inclusion from a green perspective.
Great. And then we have a question about our donors, asking us whether we've shared our new grant-making priorities with our donors and with those who have donor-advised funds with the Foundation. And the questioner asks whether those donors are being encouraged to think about making contributions to nonprofits that are based on our new areas of emphasis. And yes, we're actually very excited about this work. Part of our new racial and economic equity agenda is about changing both what we do and how we do it. And so we've been hosting different sessions for our donors, first even before we rolled out the equity agenda to get their perspectives. And now in this implementation phase, we're offering donors many different opportunities to learn with us and to think about their own philanthropic journeys in different ways, giving them all sorts of exposure to different issues, to different communities, and to different efforts that are on the ground seeking changes day by day. Now we have a question about whether we can clarify if mental health is included in the fact that health care in general is not funded by the three pathways. And yes, mental health care is in fact not included the same way that health care is not. But again, we're looking to the social determinants of health, and there are plenty of examples where improving the social determinants of health will also include people's mental health status. And then we have a final question about whether we could say more about how immigration and refugee work around immigrant rights, economic justice, economic integration, civic integration, whether that fits into our new funding strategy. And the answer is a very loud yes. And in fact, this writer's given all sorts of examples in their question about how it fits in. So work with immigrants from a rights perspective, work with immigrants from the perspective of jobs, barriers to education and other opportunities, efforts for economic integration. Those are all efforts that we will be very interested in funding and clearly fit across the three pathways, and also I'm sure will fit into the innovation opportunity as well. So we're running out of time here. I do want to thank everyone for being on the call today, for sending in your questions, and for talking with us as well. We will be posting this entire call, and we will be posting questions associated with the call, both the ones that we're able to answer and ones that we received but were not able to answer. And you can continue to send us questions using the VP programs at sff.org address, and we will answer your questions and we will post them as well on the website. As we mentioned, we'll hold another call in November once our new guidelines are posted, and we'll also continue to keep you updated. We'll keep you updated through the website and emails and posts so that we can communicate our progress as it's unfolding, and we can keep you informed about ways you can get engaged, apply for a grant, or participate in one of the Foundation's programs. We're really honored to be working with all of you as we seek to advance racial and economic equity across the Bay Area. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and also thank all of you for the important work that you're engaged in. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon.